Yo, 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 everyone. Welcome to OP Radio number 10. Can you believe we're on episode 10? I remember when OP Radio not too long ago was just a gleam in my eye, and now we're already 10 episodes in. It's amazing what you can accomplish with just a little consistent effort. We have another great episode lined up for you today with a really interesting guest. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Before I let him introduce himself, though, I do have a few colleagues with me here today from the OP Labs side. Joanna, do you want to say hello to the people and tell them who you are?
Absolutely. Thanks. Yeah, so I ran the BD side of the house on NFT and DAO strategies for Optimism. And yeah, as Mac was saying, I too are very excited about the conversation we're about to have. Yeah, again, I'll let him introduce himself, but um, Mike is a longtime builder in our ecosystem and have created a bunch of projects, not just a NFT project, but gaming project. And soon he will talk about the new project that he's going to launch with us. So yeah, very excited about talking to this community. And if anyone in the community is working on or wants to work on, exciting projects in the NFT space and gaming, please do get in touch with me. Thanks.
There you have it, folks. Her DMs are open. We also have a new optimist with us here today. She's a content strategist at OP Labs. We're super excited that she's joined recently. Lindsay, do you want to say hi to the folks on OP Radio and tell them who you are?
Hi, everybody. I'm Lindsay, and I think this is my 4th week at Optimism. Joined as a content strategist just to help the team get all of these amazing stories about everything that we're building out into the world, because there's so much. I'm really excited to be listening today and happy to meet you all.
Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, I put the call out for someone to join us as a co-host and help out with logistics, because I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Twitter has a tendency to rug Twitter Spaces. And so I've learned to have a backup co-host, and Lindsay was gracious and generous enough to agree to that. So thank you, Lindsay, for joining us today. Okay, that's the OP Lab side of things. Now moving on to today's guest. Mike, you want to tell the folks who you are?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with everyone. My name is Michael Boyle. I have been working on Optimism ecosystem projects since Dope Wars, which is an on-chain version of, I guess you could think of it as like Grand Theft Auto for the blockchain. We deployed, I think, one of the earliest NFTs to Optimism, and probably to date, one of the more complex NFTs in the ecosystem, which is our Hustlers contract, which is basically a character in the Dope Wars universe. And as an NFT, it's pretty cool because it does on-chain rendering of SVGs and allows owners to do some pretty complex stuff, like change the character's clothing and accessories and vehicles and all kinds of crazy stuff, all on chain. And thanks to Optimism's low transaction fees and scalability. So that's how I got started. Me and a couple of other of the leaders there realized that it's really difficult to manage NFT communities through Discord and a lot of the existing tools that have been available to us that are mostly Web2 based. And so we started working on a project called Rebel, which is a platform for Web3 community engagement, but also increasingly decentralized content publishing. We have an eye toward bringing the sort of Web2 creator economy into Web3. And so Rebel is a platform that's been purpose-built for that. So we do content publishing and community engagement. And I'm really excited to be here to chat about that with you all today.
You have been building on Optimism for a long time. Dope Wars was one of the early projects. Do you remember exactly when that was, when you started working on Dope Wars?
Dope Wars originally minted, I was just thinking about this earlier. I think Dope Wars originally minted on mainnet, I think toward the end of last year. And when we decided that we were going to start building a game and wanted to have this really complex NFT, there was actually a lot of debate internally whether we wanted to launch that NFT project on mainnet or on NL2. And Optimism quickly emerged as the obvious choice for us to do that. And I can't remember, I was trying to think of when we launched the Hustlers contract, but I believe it was towards the beginning of this year, like maybe in the first quarter. I want to say around like March or April, maybe is when we launched that, but don't quote me on that.
Interesting. And can you walk me through like that thought process of, you said you were thinking about mainnet and then also considering Optimism. And I would hazard to guess that because of the sort of the quite complex types of transactions involved with Dope Wars is the reason you chose an L2 and Optimism ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, we needed to have EVM equivalents. That was super important to being able to write the contract that we wanted to write. And we wanted the transaction fees to be really low because we wanted people to be able to equip. So, like your character in your hustler character can have different clothing, it can have a weapon, it can have a vehicle, and all kinds of like things that you can kind of attach and unattach. And then you can sell and trade those items independently of your NFT. And all of this occurs within the same set of contracts. And so the sort of debate was whether we wanted to have it on mainnet, where at the time the exposure would have been much higher because there was marketplaces like OpenSea where there would be visibility on all this stuff, or if we wanted and doing so on mainnet would involve really high transaction fees. And back then, like fees were crazy. Probably would have been prohibitive for us to actually get anybody to use the contract and to do any of that stuff on mainnet, frankly. Or if we wanted to deploy to an L2, looking forward and realizing that in the short term, we might have a little less exposure on this stuff, but in the long term, talking on the span of like years, and it didn't really take that long, frankly, for usage to catch up. But we figured having low transaction fees and that the future of consumer behavior would be on L2s. And so that was those were pretty much the trade-offs that we were evaluating at the time. But I'm pretty sure that we were always leaning toward optimism. Like I don't remember it being a very heated debate. I think that the whole community kind of rallied behind taking a bet on certainly on doing it on an L2, but moreover on optimism itself.
Great. Yeah. I'm always just curious to hear like projects thought process there and how they make those decisions. Very cool. Okay. So, and then after Dope Wars, that's when you went to work on Rebel, right? Or was there anything in between there?
Not really. I mean, it kind of the desire to really work on Rebel came from running community stuff through Dope Wars and Discord. Discord remains to this day kind of a nightmare to engage like Web3 communities because of things like spam and scams and just a whole variety of reasons. Security was a big thing. And also it kind of like we wanted a better way to publish content because we do a lot of video stuff. We have a podcast, and Discord isn't the best way to distribute those things and kind of make them available for people to discover and consume. And so as we were running community at Dope Wars, like we more and more felt this need to have something to kind of extend that community activity and begin to take over a lot of that publishing and content strategy. And so we started hacking on Rebel probably about mid-year, I would say, and have to date built a pretty robust platform for publishing content and engaging community with things like contests and events and bounties and rewards and all kinds of cool stuff. So that was where Rebel kind of came from.
Very cool. I know you already kind of gave a description of Rebel, but if you were to give just like the one-liner, logline, elevator pitch, how would you describe it?
I would say I'm increasingly thinking of Rebel as Web3 Tumblr or maybe Web3 Patreon. We're really kind of trying to what I'll say is I think the next big wave in Web3 is going to come from a combination of social, like social activity and media publishing. And I think when you look at platforms like Patreon or Substack or maybe like OnlyFans and these sort of like Web2 creator economy platforms, I think that Web3 offers a much better arrangement for creators on so many levels, from access to content, decentralized content publishing, as well as payment rails to support independent projects. And so I think of NFT projects as kind of being under that creator economy umbrella. And so when I think about the future of content publishing on the internet, everything from podcasts to people who make videos to newsletters and blogs, as well as NFT projects, I bucket all of that under a creator economy. And I think that we need really great publishing tools under Web3. And so that's why I think of Rebel kind of as like a sort of Web3 version of Tumblr or Patreon or one of those type services.
Yeah, I think this is such an interesting thesis of yours. Everybody's always speculating about what's going to be the next thing for the next bull run. A lot of people will say gaming or, NFTs or some new iteration of NFTs. But I think this is a really interesting thesis you have, is this creator economy. Because we could kind of see it shifting in Web 2 with like Substack, as you mentioned, and Patreon, but that's still, as you said, a Web 2 model, right? So it's not fully decentralized. And the way I think of these things, as a creator, I mean, I'm a writer myself, and like, I think for any creator, if you're going to be, pouring your heart and your soul and your most valuable resource, which is your time, into creating content, you want to make sure that that platform is going to be there and available for you, and you're not just going to get rugged unexpectedly. I mean,
Sure.
it's just like I think it's just like a huge concern. Like if with some of these Web 2.0 companies, it's like you're building a castle on sand. Like you just don't know what's going on behind the scenes and what the decision-making process is. And you could wake up one day and, potentially years worth of work and effort could just be wiped clean.
Which happens. It happens like mega frequently. I mean, we just now experienced this annoying Twitter Spaces bug, and it's like, well, what are you going to do? Use the other Twitter? That option really isn't available to us because these sort of incumbent Web 2 companies they're all very siloed. I mean, people talk in terms of like walled gardens, but these are more like fortified gardens. Like there's no way to have competition, I think. And so it is incredibly important for creators to have their content and the relationships with their, call them followers or subscribers or fans or whatever you want to call them, but those relationships should exist independent of any platform's control. In fact, it should be completely controlled by the creator themselves, under what rules they want to make their content available, and for those relationships to be decentralized. And so I think this is like the great promise of blockchains and, I guess, decentralized content storage, is the idea that there's just one big shared database of all of this stuff, and anybody can build user experiences or applications or experiences on top of that data. That sort of innovation and competition doesn't exist in the world of Web 2 because these platforms have everybody sort of locked up under their own rules, and a small C-suite of executives make the decisions on behalf of millions of creators about how their content is available, whether they can monetize it and under what terms, and who can build what on top of that content. So it's going to be super exciting for people who are trying to build independent media careers, and it being Web3. And it's going to be a combination of blockchain stuff, and it's going to be decentralized content storage and availability. But when those things are sort of available and people who build apps or services are able to confidently go all in on that stuff, knowing that Twitter's not going to just pull their API keys or limit what integrations are able to do with that, it's going to it's going to be kind of like a Cambrian explosion of cool stuff and a lot more competition, which is super duper important.
Yeah, I am incredibly excited about this idea of the Web3 creator economy. I'll be honest, right now it does seem like a little like we're pretty far away from it, but I do think things are starting to come online. And it's like things don't really change for a long time, and then they tend to change really quickly. So I think we could see that. I think it's definitely a possibility, and I definitely hope it turns out to be the case, because the situation right now, like I said, not only are the users, as a user, you are the product, right? Because your data is being sold. But then I think it's even worse for creators, because like I said, you're actually putting even more time and energy into creating this content, which is how these platforms, that's the whole reason anybody goes on them to begin with. And you're really not in control. As you said, Mike, there's like this mediation that's being performed between you and your fans, when really you should just be able to engage with them however you want.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, part of the reason that I was excited to come on this show today and talk about this stuff is because I know a lot of builders tune into OP Radio, and I am sure that a lot of people who think about creating content or create content themselves are also tuning in. And I agree with you that it's very early. And I want to point to the opportunity for great tooling around this stuff to be built, and B, for it to be built on Optimism specifically. Because I think that Optimism offers, as an ecosystem, I mean, on the technology layer, it's like amazing. The gigabrains that work at OP Labs are super impressive. But I think that there is also really unique elements of the culture and the approach in governance, and these like pretty radical new ideas like retroactive public goods funding that make Optimism completely unique and in the landscape of L2 options and just sort of blockchains period, right? I mean, I think that people today, when you survey the landscape of like, okay, I want to launch a new NFT project and where should I launch that? There are a number of options available to folks. And I'm convinced that whether you're launching an NFT project, which probably many people are sort of like familiar with, but moreover, if you want to launch a premium media property, whether that's like a podcast that has premium episodes, or if you want to sell fitness classes, or if you want to do educational videos, or like a zillion sort of creator economy archetypes, that Optimism should be the default choice of where to do those things. And we can get into it, like we can get into like the retro to public goods funding stuff. We can get into the governance stuff. I don't know how deep you want to go down those rabbit holes.
Yeah, I would love to. I'd love to hear kind of your perspective on that. Before we do, though, I would just like to say, this is just repeating something that people much smarter than me have said, but it's been said before by some of the big brains at OP Labs and Optimism, that what really separates these chains, especially if we're talking about layer twos in that category. And, at a certain level, I'm not a technical person. I'm not the person to talk to about the technical differences, of which there certainly are some. But at the end of the day, it's really going to be, these chains are going to have different culture and different values. Yeah. And that's where I see is Optimism really standing apart, really taking a solid stance on what we believe in here and what makes us different.
Totally. I think one element that's really powerful for creators is how involved they can become in the governance process at Optimism. The fact that Optimism is so forward with community governance and getting users involved in the decision making around how it's all going to work and who's running what, and these major decisions about the chain, gives anybody a voice in the direction that things go. And I think that content creators have a distinct advantage by the very nature of being prolific and having like outsized reach compared to, say, just like a regular user. And so if you care about,
and I'm happy to chime in from what I what I've been talking to creators, some of the themes that kind of bubbles up from those conversations too. I think you mentioned like what are the main differences between Optimism and some other chains. I mean, the first thing is we are the closest aligned with Ethereum, right? Both from a technology standpoint and from a value standpoint. That's what Mike was really highlighting, the value standpoint. And we're very much, the only chain that really just been scaling the Ethereum decentralization value standpoint to our DAO, right, to our community. And we even practicing that with folks that were trying to get into the delegate process. So that's number one. And I think everyone who's dialing into this, Open Radio today is very much a value aligned builder here. And, I think once you subscribe to that value proposition, it's the next one is really more from a technology standpoint. You're looking at the fact that our tooling system within the chain is really identical and completely compatible with what they're familiar with on the Ethereum chain. So again, you don't have to worry about buying like a Matic, a different coin just to participate into like Polygon's ecosystem. You can just use ETH, right, as your gas token to launch your project on Optimism. And we have a very robust, OP kind of token grant process where we help the NFT projects to bootstrap their activities with the token grant incentives, both from a minting perspective and trading perspective. That's, one of the things I'm happy to speak to any kind of newcomers into the space. And then I think lastly, just to go back to the community, right? I mean, the ecosystem, we have been organically growing the ecosystem without me actually joining. We already have a huge presence in Thailand, for instance, in APAC. We have a huge presence in Turkey, in China, Taiwan. And that's exciting to me. I mean, the fact that we didn't send a single person down to Thailand and we have 30% of our entire community down there it's truly unique, right? It's truly special. So
I do volunteer though. I volunteer to go to Thailand.
Oh yeah, I know you will.
If someone needs to go, I will go. I will do what must be done.
Exactly. I love that. Yeah, so just to wrap that up, I mean, I think we have a really interesting mix of people that are value aligned and really experimenting, right? New things, innovative ideas. We're not talking just about PFP projects here. We're talking even today, right, about new use cases, how to build these, utility or subscriber NFTs, right? These are all kind of new use cases that we're championing. So yeah, I'll leave it there. But I think there's a lot of reasons why an NFT creator should consider OP as their default home.
Thanks for that, Joanna. We're still trying to get Mike back up. I think what happened is, Elon probably had the bots listening in to anyone criticizing Twitter and boots them whenever they pick that up. So they heard our criticisms of Web 2 and kicked Mike off. Mike, I think you might be back
Yeah,
up.
I think I'm back. This is a real example, everybody, of why you all need to stop what you're doing right now and start building some Web3 social apps, because your boy's getting a little tilted over here.
Welcome to my life, man. This is me every Wednesday, 3 p.m. UTC, but we make do.
Yeah.
And we'll clean it up in the post edit. So thanks everybody for bearing with us, and thanks Mike for hanging in there.
Yeah, I don't know if it's me or what, but anyway, so the other thing that I wanted to mention too, I think, where it comes to Optimism being a special place for creators, is that I think the retroactive public goods funding angle is especially great for creators who are doing educational content. You guys just introduced today the public goods funding round 2, right?
Yep, that's right. We had a huge announcement.
Yeah.
It's 10 million OP to public goods in February of 2023.
Yeah.
So check out optimism.mirror.xyz, y'all, in the Twitter if you didn't catch that yet.
And one of the tent poles, one of the three, if I recall correctly, one of the three major categories of where you'd like to see some of that funding go to is education, right? So I assume that creators can play a big role in producing that content. And there are a lot of people who are like creating content today without any kind of paywall, without any kind of advertising. Like I think of like the Web3 experience and some of these other folks who are out there making great stuff. And I hope to see retroactive public goods funding going back toward creators like that, because they're producing content that's helping to educate people about blockchains and Web3 and what's going on and what to be paying attention to. And I think that for a lot of creators, this will be a great way to not have to take on advertisers or to not have to limit the size of their audience through paywalls and some of those mechanisms, because they can look forward to mechanisms like retroactive public goods funding to help get paid for their hard work. But for those who do want to use paywalls, check out rebel.fun, as we can help you with some of that stuff. These are unique to Optimism, and I think they're amazing, amazing, amazing reasons to be building there, to be publishing content and to be enabling your communities through Optimism, and for builders to be creating apps and experiences that leverage this stuff to forge a better world than Twitter gave us or some of these other legacy platforms gave us. Not that Twitter's terrible, but I just think that really a lot of the Web 2 systems have created less than ideal sort of incentives, and a much better world can be made through some of these Web3 mechanics.
Here, here. Yeah, I think the metaphor of like the West is often used to describe layer twos. And I think that's definitely applicable here, where there's just a lot of opportunity to anybody who's willing to be a first mover, to anybody who's willing to experiment, to try something different. I think you're really gonna, there's the potential to really have a lot of success. So I'm really excited. I can't wait to see what the next couple years will bring. And I'm very optimistic, to be honest. Mike, switching back to Rebel, I was checking it out. What phase are you guys in? Like, is it usable? I connected my wallet. I saw there's some communities you can join. Is it open and available for people to check out?
We've been in like kind of under the radar, sort of privately building and iterating and getting feedback from folks. I would say that we are so we're launching our first NFT project as Rebel next week. We're building a little social club called Beers, which is at beers.fun, and that's running on Rebel. And I would say probably with the launch of that project, we will be sort of starting to much more publicly talk about the stuff that we're working on and what Rebel does. So over the past few months, we've been sort of like working closely with a couple of communities like Dope Wars and iterating based on their feedback, as well as getting some advisors and those types of folks involved in the process. And we're really confident that this version that's going online imminently will be our sort of like public launch. So with that, we're introducing some pretty cool stuff. The thing I'm most excited about is we've been working on an extension to the ERC 721 standard for subscriptions. So the idea is sort of like replicating a Patreon style monthly or quarterly or annual subscription to your NFT collections, which will allow NFT projects or media communities to have recurring revenue. And so it allows you to use like any NFT contract. You just like include this module we call subscribable, and people can pay. We're probably going to have for Beers, it'll probably be like $5 a month. But if you have a podcast and you want to charge $5 a month for premium episodes, or if you have an events community or experiences that you want to charge for, you can do that. And I think that there is this, the sort of NFT ecosystem has been experiencing like downward pressure on creator royalties. That's been kind of like the hot topic for the past couple of months, it feels like, where the hot debate is like whether marketplaces should enable creator royalties. And as a mechanism for monetizing, which is important for a lot of communities, certainly if you want to have an independent career that's enabled by your NFT project, you've got to have revenue in some form or another. So this sort of like combination, like the 1-2 punch of there being a focus on free mints and then the downward pressure on creator royalties is going to make it really tough for people to generate any kind of revenue for their NFT projects. And so our solution to this is the introduction of subscriptions, where if you want to add additional layers of features or services or functionality to your collection, you can charge a periodic subscription that people can opt into. So Rebel is going to facilitate the launching of contracts that support subscriptions, as well as the management of all of that stuff, so that your members and hopefully just like regular non-crypto pilled people, like it's easy enough to use that just like anybody can go in and start using collect your NFTs and upgrade to subscription versions of them the same way that they would subscribe to their favorite podcast on Patreon. And so we think that like we should like sidestep the whole debate about creator royalties and look at new forms of revenue generation for NFT projects. And we're kind of all in on subscriptions. So we've got like a sort of redesign of our current Rebel and platform about to launch, as well as support for this subscription mechanism. And we're pretty stoked on that. So I would say like next week we'll be launching Beers. That's at beers.fun. And our Twitter handle for that is @beersfun. And if you want to check out like what that looks like, it'll be the first thing that we have that subscription capability attached to. And if you are a content creator, or if you're thinking about launching an NFT project, or if you have an NFT project and you want to integrate subscriptions into it, shoot us a DM. Like I'll do a personal onboarding and get you all set up on Rebel and all the new stuff that we're about to launch to get you started with it. Because I think we really think that's going to be one major new way for communities to thrive. I think that there's also like this weird tension for NFT collections who, like, on one hand, you want to have a stable, growing community of people who are members, but if your only mechanism is to make money is for those people to sell their NFTs, then it's like quite contradictory. Like you want people to remain members, but also be able to sort of like generate revenue. And right now, like creator royalties basically monetize churn, which is kind of a weird thing. So I think like I think the meta in NFTs is going to start to shift away from this sort of like speculative model where people buy an NFT and hope to sell it for more later, and shift into this zone where you get an NFT, maybe it's a free mint, maybe you're airdropped it or something. And then if you want to support a project or unlock additional layers of experiences, then you'll begin to be able to subscribe to it. And so Rebel is going to be the best way to make those experiences available to members and also to monetize the stuff through that method.
Very cool. Yeah. And I think we've seen like in the last 5 years that people are totally willing to support the support the artists and creators that they like, right?
100%.
We just need to kind of get that whoever's mediating that relationship, it would be nice to just be able to remove them so you can just, those two parties can just deal with each other directly.
Exactly. I mean, the future that I'm really excited for is one where you as the creator are able to set up a smart contract, and that should be like a really, really easy point and click thing to do. And you can specify the rules like, this feature is available for this amount of money, or if you want to support me, this is like how you do it. And that multiple providers, Rebel, and let there be 1,000 Rebels that are helping to connect those consumers to your experience. And all of them are using that same contract and facilitating these relationships through a very standard mechanism. And we're all in competition with each other to provide the best experience, right? So if Rebel ships an app that disconnects the Twitters or the speakers from the spaces all the time, somebody else builds another platform that doesn't do that. And suddenly they are in a competitive zone that like makes everything much better. Because right now we don't really have an alternative to using Twitter or a potentially better sort of like chat experience, because all of that data, all of these relationships, all that stuff is locked up within the Twitter database. So, it all goes back to just this sort of theme of decentralization. And I think that's going to be just a major unlock for the ecosystem overall.
I agree. Yeah. And I hope we see it. I can't wait. I hope we see more of it soon. And we need more stuff like, it sounds like what Rebel is, which is this infrastructure for the creator economy. We need more of that stuff to come online ASAP.
100%.
Okay, well, I feel like we might be close to closing up. Mike, do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
No, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. It was really awesome to be here. And again, if you're a creator, if you're running a NFT community, if you're looking to play with any of these tools, shoot us a DM. Our Twitter handle is @rebel.fun, and we'll get you set up. We can schedule a call or something. I'd be happy to walk you through these things, and follow our Twitter account because we'll be announcing some launch stuff and some exciting new things over the next week or two. So we'd love to have you. We're excited to be building for Optimism.
What a different experience having someone you can actually talk to and who answers your DMs. I can tell you that won't happen at Twitter. I can speak from experience.
Yeah. Unlikely to get responses there, but we're pretty responsive here.
No. And I will just say for the Optimism OP Labs side, if you are a builder and you have an idea for maybe some infrastructure in the creator economy, or maybe it's some other type of project, we have some really great documentation. And if you go to help.optimism.io, you'll find what you need there. Specifically, if you go to other topics and then how do I get involved with Optimism, that'll get you started. And with that, I just want to thank you, Mike, for joining us. Thank you for bearing with our technical difficulties. This has been a really fascinating conversation.
Yeah, I had a great time. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Joanna and Lindsay, for joining us as well. And everybody listening in, have a great rest of your day. We'll see you on the internet. Stay optimistic, y'all.